It's Bigfoot Collectors Club with Bryce, Michael, and Riley. I know a story of high strangeness or two. Let's do this.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Bigfoot Collectors Club, the show where we talk to amazing guests about their personal paranormal history and share stories of high strangeness. I'm your host, Michael McMillan. With me always is your other host,
Bryce Johnson.
And our super producer,
Riley Bray.
Oh boy, it's BCC jet ski summer. All summer long, we're looking at cryptids, UFOs, and stories of high strangeness that have some kind of connection to water. I think. I mean, that's the plan, but we'll see.
No, that's great. That's a good thread. We can build on that, man, for sure.
I feel like water, considering it covers most of the planet, we have a lot to choose from.
Yeah, it's safe.
There's
always
always
works.
yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Our bodies are
water
mostly
nearby.
water, so if there's a person involved, it's about water. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. There's water and everything, guys.
We explained it in the song. It's all in the song.
Yeah, that's right. It's in Aquakinetic. We laid down the rules there. Go check it out if you don't know what we're talking about. Jet ski special. Boys, speaking of jet ski special and being at the lake, have you been back to any bodies of water yet, or are you still basking in the glow of our retreat to Shaver Lake?
I did jump in a pool after work, and I'm still basically my hair's wet. I'm sitting in shorts recording this, so I barely made it on time. But it was so hot, and I got out of work, and I had to jump in a pool. So, it's on brand, and that's why I didn't text Michael back, because I was scrambling to be here on time, and ran us in a great big circle trying to do the episode. Sorry about that.
Sounds like someone's having a little party boy summer when you should be focusing on the podcast that we're trying to make tonight.
We can do both.
Party
we
boy
can do
summer.
both.
Riley, are you having a party boy summer?
Stop
Look, I was up
prioritizing.
at 5 a.m. this morning. All right.
Stop
I had a long
prioritizing your
day.
party boy summer over our jet ski summer, Riley.
You're right.
Well, we're very excited about our expert guest this week, but before we bring him in, let's do some more banter that everybody wants to hear.
Let's make him wait.
Let's have some clubhouse keeping, guys, real quick. Hey, if you're looking, maybe you've noticed on your favorite podcast app next to Bigfoot Collectors Club, or under the icon, it no longer says Campfire Media. It now says Wood Elf Media. That's because BCC has joined Wood Elf Media. We're on a brand new network. We're very excited. This doesn't mean anything for you guys. You're still going to get the show in the same place, although Campfire Media is no longer in existence. Rest in peace, Campfire Media. Long live Wood Elf. We're still working with some of the Campfire folks, and that's how this all came about. We're very excited. Basically, this is a big new network that we're joining. So we hopefully are going to be reaching all new audience members. If you guys are hearing us for the first time, welcome. And I want to thank Campfire for the past 3 years of the show, basically. For being there and supporting us and supporting the show. But for you guys, the show still works the same. We just wanted to make that announcement. We're excited to be joining Wood Elf. Also, a much more appropriate, Campfire is good for a Bigfoot podcast, but Wood Elf is more fun.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Indeed.
Sounds like
we are
something
very, very excited about this new network.
Very excited.
We're happy that they're having us.
Yes, thank you. All right, new shirts. BCC Jet Ski Summer by James Mulholland is available now in the Bigfoot Collectors Club TeePublic shop. The link to our shop is in the show notes of this episode and in the link tree in our bio on Instagram at Bigfoot Collectors Club and on Twitter at Bigfoot Pod. And I hope you enjoyed last week's Patreon unlock. Coming up this week on Patreon we will be diving into one of the funniest cryptids, and I'm not going to tell you who that is. To check out that episode and our entire backlog of episodes, go to patreon.com/Bigfoot Collectors Club. Your monthly $5 pledge not only unlocks the other side, the parallel dimension of BCC, it also supports the show, allowing production of our podcast to continue on forever. And if you don't have $5 to pledge every month, you can give us a 5-star salute by going to Apple Podcasts and leaving us a 5-star review like this one.
From Zach_Gelfand. So much fun. I love this show. 5 stars.
Great. That's all I got to leave, guys.
Review.
That's
short and
all
sweet.
you need to do. Okay, enough is enough. Our guest this week is one of the most well-recognized and highly sought-after investigators of UFO, paranormal, and occult phenomena in the world. He has been actively involved in the field of anomalistic, conspiratorial, occult, ufological, and paranormal research for well over 3 decades. And tonight, ladies and gentlemen, he's going to talk to us about water. That's right, water. Please welcome back to the show, author, podcaster, producer, investigator, and paranormal renaissance man, John E.L. Tenney. Welcome back, John.
Woo! Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in and talking about one of the most basic elements and its connection to high strangeness.
Well, I do love water. I try and stay hydrated.
I mean, one of the most famous biblical stories is water transmogrifying into wine. And last I checked in with you, you told me you were at a haunted winery.
Yeah, I just got back from a haunted winery, Belvoir Winery in Liberty, Missouri. So a whole weekend.
That's my neck of the woods. Sorry, I got excited.
It's all right. I was right there. Yeah, it's a great place. And usually once a year I go out there, if not more, and, take people on ghost hunts. I usually get put in, there's a cemetery out back. And so I usually get put in the cemetery because I smoke cigarettes. So I build a campfire and we roast marshmallows and tell ghost stories.
They have you in your own little smoker section with other cigar, old-timey cigar smoking and pipe smoking ghosts coming through.
That's the thing. We're being at an old place. Like I always tell people, people are always looking for trigger objects for ghosts. And the one thing that I do that really isn't common anymore that was immensely common was cigarettes.
So the smoke you find is like a paranormal trigger, or?
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many times when, it's problematic for anyone that's taking photographs because there's smoke clouds floating around everywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
But at the same time, if you're looking for something to trigger, the memories and the experiences of something, from the turn of the century up until 1980s, it's cigarette smoke.
I mean, if you died in the 1950s before the anti-smoking campaign really took hold, and you get to the other side and there's no cigarettes over there, you gotta be jonesing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if any part of me persists after I lose my biological form and there's not cigarettes there, I will be an angry ghost.
This is an interesting idea. Do you think that aspects of our personalities may be what if only the aspect of your personality that's addicted to nicotine remains after you die? Do you think it's possible that our spirits fractions off into different parts like that?
I mean, it's obviously a possibility, but I've always thought that once if something of me persists and then continues on in some other realm, experiencing that realm, I've only ever known, as far as I know, how to experience the universe and reality with eyes and a body and hands. Mm-hmm. And so there's going to be this leap where I start to experience reality or the universe or the cosmos without a biological form. So then when you take that into account, how long will I still even be John Tenney? The 6-year-old John Tenney is kind of alive within me, but it's dead in the sense that because of my experiences gained over the years of being alive, that 6-year-old doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
So why would I continue to just, if I die at 60, why would I just stay at 60 if I'm beginning to experience all new realms of existence?
I mean, as we all know, when we become men, we must murder our own little boys. We must murder our former selves. Bury the past.
Well, I think, because whether or not you guys we've ever talked about this, I died when I was 18. So that kind of did happen to me.
Oh, yeah, that's true. We talked about it on the show, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Yes, I remember it. So, I mean, you've possibly experienced that other side. Do you think it could also be there's this idea, I think it's called something like the stone tape theory, but when emotions are at high they can set forth sort of this triggering memory effect. Maybe like an addictive behavior, something like strong, like even like heroin addiction can be so strong, so emotionally charged that perhaps there could be some type of lingering, angry, addictive, type of entity left behind. Could something like that possibly happen?
Yeah, that idea, that stone tape theory that you're talking about, which really became popular in the 70s because there was a BBC show actually called The Stone Tape, which explored that idea.
Oh.
But there was an author, researcher named T.C. Lethbridge, and his idea was that he was the one who kind of really put the idea together that maybe the crystalline structure and moving water, creating a kind of electromagnetic, energetic form of energy near the crystalline structures, that it was somehow acting like a giant tape recorder, and if you went there and had some kind of large emotional experience, it would imprint onto that area. Well, then over the years, as people would go to those locations, they'd experience, let's say it was terror. They'd walk into this field of terror. They themselves would feel terror, which would re-imprint upon the terror. And then years after this would continually happening, you would get massively haunted places. And it's not that there was a ghost there. It was the imprint from these emotional experiences layered on top of each other.
Like an energetic feedback loop kind of situation. Yeah. That's interesting.
What kind of, how would you get a stoned tape like player? What, how do you play those messages back?
Well, Lethbridge and then other researchers who kind of ran forward with that we're actually kind of the players. We're the ones that see and experience the recording once it's imprinted in these locations. And if you talk to paranormal investigators and paranormal researchers, you will always hear them talking about, the most allegedly haunted locations and hotspots are always like these giant old prisons or these giant old institutions or old houses, and they all have these enormous granite foundations, and they're usually set up near rivers and lakes. So there's this idea that there is this thing happening that we don't quite understand in nature, where we're all kind of imprinting on the world.
Look at us bringing it back to water, huh? Look at that. How
I'm
about
a professional.
That? Wow.
This guy knows how to stay on thesis.
Dude, when I knew we were having John on tonight, I had this image of like the Wild Stallions, like when they call on Rufus, it's like Tenney, like always coming in to like rescue any just stray theory or thought and just guide us right back on the path. I love it.
Well, I want to stay path adjacent and just get back to a moment to this haunted winery. Did any activity happen this past weekend you were there that was of note to you?
Not for me, for some of the guests for sure, but being up in the cemetery, it's pretty quiet up there. It's hard to research because there's so much outside noise, so it contaminates a lot of the people doing EVP sessions. But yeah, every time people go there, they have the first time I ever went there, it hadn't been done being reconstructed and put together. So I spent the night alone there. The owner kind of gave me the keys and said, good luck. And I went out late at night to smoke a cigarette, and when I got past the second floor, I heard some like little footsteps running. And obviously I've done this long enough, it didn't really bother me. So then I went, after I was finished with my cigarette, back upstairs, and I stopped near where I had heard the footsteps, and I heard them again. And then I heard a voice. I couldn't tell if it was a little boy or girl say, "Why is he awake?" And then in the morning when the owner came, I said, "Have there been kids in this building?" And he said, "Oh yeah, the second floor used to be an orphanage."
Whoa. Wow. That's
so I think the orphans who were sneaking around being bad kids at night found me, the adult who was sneaking around being a bad guy, smoking my cigarettes.
I love it. Yeah, that's great. I like you being quarantined out in the cool kids section, smoking in the cemetery. I often tell my kids, I'm like, hey, if we do go to hell, listen, that's where all the cool people are anyway. So you're going to have a good time. Don't worry about that.
You know what? I'll tell you what. I mean, I don't think anybody should smoke, obviously. I wish I didn't. I quit many times. But when I go to paranormal conventions and stuff, I will tell you it really affords me an opportunity because I have to go somewhere usually by myself. There's not a lot of smokers. And people who attend the conventions who feel nervous about talking in public about their paranormal stories will see me standing by myself. And it's really this kind of opportune moment for them to, speak privately with me and tell me their stories, and I can listen to them. And so I feel like it affords me this moment with guests and people who come to these events that I wouldn't get if I was just, behind a table or hosting a ghost hunt in a building.
Love it. I still love the smell. Still love the
That's
smell.
how I met all my favorite actors, was like they'd come out and have a cigarette after the plays I would see in New York. And that's when you always got a chance to talk to them. That's how I met Philip Seymour Hoffman. He borrowed a light from me so he could have a cigarette. And that was back in my smoking days. So I got to have a smoke with him.
Nowadays, I'll just, maybe meet a fellow actor downstairs, have a stick of gum and a non-alcoholic beer. And it's pretty much the same. It's the same exact thing. Same exact thing.
That's right, kids. That's right.
Well, being in Los Angeles and having access to more actors and actresses and people in the entertainment industry, can you guys break the code of silence? There's when I look online, I think there's still a lot of actors that smoke.
I will say I feel like less than there used to be for sure. But yeah, definitely. Because I think smoking is one of those things that, when you're on set, and also I think in rehearsal, like you get these 5-minute, 10-minute breaks when you're rehearsing plays. And there's kind of only one thing you can do in that period, and it's go have a cigarette. Kind of like it's a social activity. And then with sets, you're sitting around waiting so much that I think a lot of people pick up smoking as a way to pass the time, or at least take advantage of all the waiting around, to have a cigarette out by the trailers. But I've definitely seen a drop off, than what it used to be 10, 20 years ago, for sure.
One of the things that I think is interesting when I film any kind of paranormal reality show or paranormal program is, over the past 20 years now, I've been on television a countless amount of times, but, they can't show, for whatever reason, they don't show me smoking, which is something that I do. And I've always thought it really strange that they have no problem having someone explain that this person was decapitated and disemboweled and their bodies were dragged across the floor, but they can't show you smoking cigarettes.
Man.
Yeah, they're required to put a content warning if there's smoking in visual media now. It's like it is treated as very, very taboo these days.
I think it's making a comeback. Unfortunately,
the pandemic has definitely brought it back. That's for sure.
I know we're supposed to talk about water, but my last smoking story is I was invited to the grand opening of Detroit's Satanic Temple a few years ago, and so I walked into I walked into the building and said hello to everyone that I knew, and there were some naked people getting Kool-Aid poured on them to dubstep music and a whole bunch of nonsense going on. And I was leaned against the wall and I lit up a cigarette, and this gentleman in a black robe came over to me and he said, you can't smoke in here.
That's great.
And I was like, this is the Satanic Temple of Detroit. And they were like, yeah, but it's against the law. Yeah, we have to, you can't crush it out or you have to leave. So I got kicked out of the Satanic Temple for smoking.
Now that is punk
amazing.
rock.
Hell
Those
yeah.
robes go up pretty quick, if they catch fire. Liberty also, if memory serves me, and maybe you know about this, John, I think Liberty is also the location of one of the gnome stories I've heard, that there was a gnome that, in my research, when we did our gnome stories, I think there was a farmhouse out in Liberty where these kids would see a gnome hanging outside in their garden at night. Does this ring a bell at all?
No, I've never heard that, but now I have to look into it for sure.
Yeah, check it out. It's I think it's a lesser known gnome story, but it's
Lesser
there.
gnome.
It's a lesser known
Lesser
story.
gnome. That's going on the
geez.
song title. That's great.
So
Lesser
John,
known
talk to
story.
us a little bit about this connection between, this has come up. We've heard now, doing this long enough, that where there's rivers or ponds or lakes, there seems to be an uptick in that area, or a higher concentration of paranormal activity. And I didn't know, or Bigfoot sightings or UFO activity even. And I didn't know if there were, what your thoughts were on that. And also if you had any cases or stories where you felt like water sort of played a integral role or some sort of connection to the phenomenon that's taking place?
For sure. I mean, I'm really biased in these accounts because, like, Michigan, I'm from Michigan, right? So I'm
Of course.
surrounded on all sides by giant bodies of water. And Michigan has Bigfoot stories and haunted houses and UFO sightings, and of course every state does, but like the concentration of weirdness of stuff in Michigan, Michigan has its own triangle, like the Bermuda Triangle, like planes have disappeared and we've never recovered any wreckage. We have lake monsters. And of recent, like, I don't even know why I started thinking about this, but years ago in Michigan, they found in the upper peninsula of Michigan, they found, while doing core sample drillings, they found like a giant mushroom up in the upper peninsula. And it actually matched like mycellular network of a mushroom that was in the lower peninsula of Michigan. And they realized that Michigan has this what they call the humongous fungus underneath it.
No
so
way.
Michigan has like a giant mushroom growing beneath the lakes and the state.
Wow.
And I can't help but think that maybe everybody in Michigan, Chicago, and Wisconsin were all kind of microdosed.
Wow, that is so great.
Whoa.
That is so great. I love that. Man, the whole power of fungus thing is just so incredible. I remember one of my favorite stories of Terrence McKenna, Psychonaut, was when he famously asked the mushroom, why here? Why Earth? And the mushroom responded, the rent is cheap.
Well, what's crazy, right, is so like there are, I think, 20 or 30 of these humongous fungus spread out across the world, always located near kind of large water tables. But, scientists are unsure, like they could be connected to each other at an even deeper level. And so, the whole planet, we might all be microdosed.
I buy that.
It's so wild. If there's anything sort of extraterrestrial that's, inhabiting the earth besides ourselves, it's the mushroom, man. It's such a strange and intoxicating thing. And, we don't know a lot about it. It still leaves a lot of mysteries, but, a lot of people felt that there was something to that plant consciousness, that perhaps there was a sentience there, an intelligence outside of our own that inhabited, the vegetable matrix, and especially the mushroom.
Yeah, I think that plants are super underestimated as a form of intelligence on this planet. I'm a vegan, right? So I had a friend of mine who's a botanist.
You
at
kill
UCL.
all those plants. You eat all those strange life forms, John.
I'm trying to get to it. I called a botanist friend of mine and I said, listen, man, you got to tell me it's okay to eat plants. Otherwise, I'm just going to starve to death over here. And he very calmly explained to me that, that plants have been here way longer than we have. And they realized early on that they were non-locomotive. So they grew all of these delicious, gorgeous looking colored plants for us to eat so that we would eat them and move their seeds around for them. And we are completely under the control of plants. They absolutely want us to eat them.
Yep.
I love that idea. I've heard that before too, that like plants they've evolved to grow a crop that we love. And so that guarantees their survival. And I actually learned about that listening to a story about marijuana. You know what I mean? And it's sort of like how I think hemp evolved. It's like, yeah, there are all these plants that are like, yeah, we really do. They really do form a symbiosis with us. And the thing with the giant mushroom too, the thing that really compels me is if that thing is at the north and south of Michigan, then it's observing and communicating with itself over a large expanse. You know what I mean? So what sort of intelligence is it experiencing from the point of view, from that sort of almost omnipresent point of view?
So that type of large scale intelligence, to bring it back to water, is something that's always fascinated me since I was a kid, because the only thing that we really know that talks over distances like that is whales. Like whale songs are known and hypothesized to travel up to 10,000 miles underneath the water.
Jeez.
And so, a whale in the Pacific can talk to a whale in the Atlantic. and we don't know what they're saying. You know, their whale songs, the themes behind they're called themes when they change pitch and tone, can go on for 30 minutes, and we don't know what they're saying, and they contain, like, scientists have broken down those themes and the pitches and changes in tone, and they've marked each change in tone as a word. And in that 30 minutes, there's more information contained within it than like in the King James version of the Bible. So what are they talking to each other about?
Whoa. Wow. Man. They're planning galactic takeovers. That's insane.
Yeah, and we found out recently, like scientists, oceanographers, and people who study cetaceans and whales and cephalopods and stuff, they've actually realized that as we created, because of boats and industry, as we've kind of created this underwater noise pollution, that whales have figured out how to negate that noise pollution we've created to be able to speak over or under it. So like they've figured out our technology. You know, we've only been doing it for 60 years, and they have already figured out how to get past it.
That's incredible. Hey, I want to get your opinion on just the power of water. A book I read early on that always fascinated me, and it's kind of held.
Oh boy,
with
here
me.
we go.
Michael, you ready for this?
Yes.
John, I want to get your take on Masaru Emoto's New York Times bestselling book, The Hidden Messages in Water, and his ability to shape the crystalline structure of a water molecule by just meditating a pure thought or a harmful thought, or playing rock and roll versus classical. What's your thought on this idea that these water molecules can become amorphous and have a consciousness of their own that can obviously affect us, because we're almost all water anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I love the theory because, you know, the way that I think, you know, obviously a lot of your listeners too, and like everything's connected, right? And so the planet is so much water and our bodies are so much water. Like obviously there has to be some kind of resonance or even a way to, perhaps the way we're talking about stone tape, like water tape theory, right? Like somehow that information can be stored in them, and they're crystalline structures, again, like the granite crystalline structures. Like they seem capable of holding information. But the fact that human beings have such a huge relationship to water, and I know me personally, I've loved swimming and I've loved the lakes since I was a kid. Like the first time I went in the ocean, I was probably about 10. My family went to Florida and I swam way out. It was probably too far for a 10-year-old. And I remember holding my breath and going under the water. And it was like this just immensely strange connection that I felt, like coming from the ocean, like almost that I felt like I was home, and that there was some kind of, what you were just saying, like there was almost some kind of like resonant memory in it. Like I can remember that feeling now, you know, at 51.
I feel like they, and not to sort of belittle your experience, I feel like they captured what you experienced at the end of Splash when Tom Hanks goes with
the same thing.
Movie touched me. At that end, I was like, okay, he's gonna be okay underwater. Even though he has to like learn to be a fish man, he's gonna do it, and it's okay. I fucking love that.
Well, you know, there is also, I think it's Alistair Hardy, who was a marine biologist in the 1940s and 50s. He was one of the first people to propose that, you know, there was also an aquatic ape theory. That we evolved from apes that swam and ate fish. It's one of the reasons we have blubber like seals and like whales. And so, you know, that there's this whole separate, almost potentially separate species that is, you know, waterborne and water lives, but are still mammals.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's like underwater Bigfoot. How awesome is that?
Extremely awesome.
It's extremely awesome. And I think there's some, I've only scratched the surface of those theories, but I think there's some validity to it. I mean, it's pretty interesting. You were saying, right? I mean, I don't know, man. There does seem to
Bryce,
be.
I've just, you know me, I just enjoy your enthusiasm. That's all. I'm charmed by it and I love it. That's all. I don't mean to condescend. God. I'm not making fun of you.
Not at all.
I love that you're like, I've barely scratched the surface and I'm already on board. That's my favorite thing about you.
That's all it takes.
Let's do this. Let's take a quick break. We got to take a break. When we come back, let's get into some cases or stories of high strangeness that involve some sort of phenomenon and a connection to water. All right, well, we're back here with John E.L. Tenney. And John, let's get into some stories of high strangeness or cases that either you've been involved with personally, we love those, or just stories that you remember, cases from the past that have stood out to you where water played some sort of curious part in it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, like I was saying, coming from Michigan, Michigan itself, the name is derived. It's an original inhabitants of this area. It means the god of the lakes, and like we have Mackinac Island, which is the turtle god. And as long as I can remember, people see what they think is a lake monster, but it's actually in the Detroit River. And we have lake monsters, quote unquote, all over the state. The thing with me as I got older is I also realized we have giant sturgeon in our lake. So I'm not sure if people are prepared who have never seen an 8-foot long, 300-pound fish before to know that that's a normal thing for a fish. But I get reports all the time of people seeing Modo, which is the monster in the Detroit River.
Whoa.
People constantly are telling me they see giant lake monsters, but I'm probably pretty sure it's giant sturgeon.
There was so I went to this, we've spoken about it before, but I went to high school up at Interlochen Arts Academy, and in between two lakes, and of course on one of the lake, Green Lake, we had a ghost of a haunted girl, a ghost of a little girl that haunted a theater, who supposedly drowned in that lake. Her name was Lois Grunow. And then on the other lake across the highway where in the summertime the boys' camp was, I was there during the school year, there was a Duck Lake. And apparently there was some sort of Duck Lake monster over there that I always pictured as being some sort of swamp creature. But I think he was more active in the summertime. But I love the idea that even the small lakes in Michigan, the two small lakes that I was closest to, had a ghost and a cryptid associated with it.
Absolutely. And Michigan is full of swamps. And so that's where we get all of our Bigfoot stories from. My parents have a cabin in northern Michigan, and there's a swamp in the background, and all the people have seen Bigfoot there. And even the largest UFO sighting that's happened in the United States, which was in 1966, is called the Swamp Gas Incident, because it happened over Frank Manor's farm, which is right near a giant swamp. And
let's talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. And, 1966, this farmer and his son see something rising up out of the swamp, or in some other cases, descending down into it. Police officers are called. The police officers see it. Over the course of the next 4 or 5 days, literally thousands of people see this object floating around Dexter, Hillsdale area of Michigan. It's chased by the police. It's so intense that at the time, our congressman, Gerald Ford, goes to the floor of the House and calls for investigations into UFOs. And again, like, water is involved, right? The Blue Book comes out. They tell J. Allen Hynek to investigate it. And he is really at odds as what to say. And the government tells him, just say it's swamp gas. And so he says it's swamp gas and is ridiculed. And obviously that ridicule is part of why J. Allen Hynek eventually forms the Center for UFO Studies and becomes a believer in UFOs.
Wasn't there a scientist who was like spewing swamp gas as an excuse as well? Or I feel like they had a guy who they would bring out to be like, it's just swamp gas.
That was Hynek for sure. He was the scientist. Okay. He was the scientist working for Blue Book at the time. And, he comes on Michigan television at the time, and obviously the press is kind of on fire because you have police officers and thousands of people across the state who have witnessed this thing. And he really was like in this weird situation. You can't just go and say, we've spent all this time studying and looking at it, and we still don't know what it is. Like, they thought it would cause panic. And so, the only kind of answer he gives is, well, we think it was probably swamp gas and, methane gases that were illuminated and created a giant ball, which of course sent a fury across Michigan, because everybody that lives in Michigan lives near a swamp, and nobody's ever seen swamp gas before.
Right. Yeah. What the fuck is swamp gas, by the way?
I've always wondered that. What is swamp gas actually?
Yeah, it's just supposed to be like a carbon or methane buildup. And, due to the static electricity in the air, it ignites, becomes like a plasma ball. And I mean, yeah, that's a scientific explanation for it, but it's so uncommon, it's almost as nonsensical as saying it's a UFO.
Huh.
Sort of the same thing happened again with the Phoenix Lights when I forget the name of the governor who came out, and he made a joke of it. It's sort of the same thing of saying swamp gas, but the thousands of eyewitnesses who experienced the Phoenix Lights were livid, because and this is how you start chipping away at the people who are disseminating information. You're like, if you're not going to take an incident like this seriously, where thousands of us saw it, even Fife Symington, I think was his
Fife
name.
Symington,
even he
yeah.
saw it. Yeah, even he saw it himself. But that's interesting how that sort of incident repeated itself with that famous swamp gas thing. And that's wild.
And I think that, the other thing that Fife Symington that was just ridiculous, during the press conference, he brings out a guy in an alien suit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
Handcuffed.
Yeah. And, this is to the same thing of what somebody who sees a Bigfoot cross road, why they're not going to report it, because they're afraid of ridicule, and it's stunts like that, don't give people a comfortable space to come forward with their experience, and when people do, it shows a sign of trust, whether they're emailing us or telling you. And but man, it's a shame. It's stuff like that keeps these stories of high strangeness at bay.
Yeah, there's a documentary that was made back, I think, in '67 it was made by CBS. It's hosted by Walter Cronkite, and it's called UFOs, Friends or Foe. And they actually talked to Frank Manor, the first guy in Michigan to see this thing in 1966. And, he's on camera, and it's this really kind of intense footage where he says, people have, broken the window of my car. They've spray painted my house. Yep. I would never tell anybody if I saw something like this. I would never, ever do it again.
Yeah. Look at what happened to the family in Hopkinsville. As soon as word got out that little green goblins had invaded their space, the whole town descended on the community and ransacked their home, took pictures inside their house, basically, made their place unlivable. As a matter of fact, they had to sell within 2 weeks because it was had become this unlivable place where people, looker-loos, were coming around, and it was all sort of to laugh at, to poke fun at this family who had experienced this incredible incident.
Well, it's an interesting point about that too is when UFOs really kicked into the kind of forefront of Americana, it's probably in the mid-50s, because the science fiction genre was really taking off in movies and films. But, what people don't realize is, there's this trope of like the family out in the woods, or the farmer who saw a UFO, and, he is kind of simple-minded, so they probably don't know what they saw, like that trope of idea. But people don't realize that, the FAA had rules against pilots talking about if they had seen UFOs. If you were a police officer, you couldn't talk about seeing UFOs. If you worked for the government, you couldn't talk about seeing UFOs. And so the only people that were allowed to be on television were normal, everyday people. And that built up this idea in the general population's mind that, only uneducated people are seeing UFOs.
Right.
Right. Non-credible witnesses. And I would imagine, even though we all know plenty of high strangeness happens in urban areas, you got to think, like, if you live out in a rural area, you got a better eye line to some of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I mean, I get reports from rural areas more than I get them from downtown Detroit, but I do get them from downtown Detroit. It's just, the other thing is there's so much distraction going on in the city. And like you said, the eye line, being able to see the horizon and see off in the distance, and there's no light pollution. So, I mean, it's there, but it's far more feasible that you're going to see something in the wilderness or in a farmer's field.
The triangle that you mentioned, sort of like the Bridgewater Triangle of Michigan, or the Bermuda Triangle of Michigan, what is that called, and what areas does it triangulate?
It's really weird. It's almost like the Bermuda Triangle in the sense that, sometimes like the Bermuda Triangle includes Bermuda, but then sometimes it doesn't, and it depends on where the researcher is drawing the line. So the Great Lakes Triangle, as we call it, it moves too. I've always considered it to be, if you look at the state of Michigan as that mitten shape that it looks like on the map, that it's a triangle that goes from side to side all the way up to Lake Superior. So it just covers the whole state and all of the lakes. And, we have like, I think it was Northwest Orient Flight 2501, I think that's it, which was a DC-4 and had 55 people on it. It left Detroit. It checked in as it started to fly over Lake Michigan, and then it just never showed up in Chicago. And we've never found any wreckage and no survivors. It's just gone.
Whoa, when was that?
I think that was in 1950, June 23rd, 1950.
Yeah.
Whoa! Wow.
Have you ever seen that video of this video of it was taken by a pilot in his cockpit, and there's a tarmac and it has windows. There's no plane on the what do you call it, the thing that you move from the plane to the gate? Anyway, but he sees these ghosts, like these traveling ghosts, like they were passengers getting off a plane. Have you ever seen that video?
I haven't. I will look it up though, for sure.
Oh yeah. It's really great. I don't know where I saw it. Probably Paranormal Caught on Camera.
I have a feeling you saw that on
but
Paranormal
it's a great
Caught
video.
on Camera.
It's a great video. Check it out. This pilot takes it, and it's all these like passengers, and they're sort of these ghostly images, and I don't know. It's a great video, but
yeah, I mean, there's actually a company in Michigan for that flight I was talking about, the Michigan Shipwreck Research Associates, MSRA. And every year, they're a nonprofit. Every year, like they put together a search team to continue to go out and look for it.
This is crazy. I have never heard of this. I'm Googling it now, and it really is it isn't over any land. It's over the lake itself.
Yeah.
There's a book here called Gateway to Oblivion by Hugh Cochrane, which is maybe the best title of a book.
Sorry.
And author.
Go on.
Oh, Hugh. But yeah, I never heard of this story. Are there UFOs reported in this triangle as well?
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So I think it was in 2000, up near Traverse City, Michigan, I got a message from, I'm trying to think if I got a phone call. I think this is long enough to go to where someone left a message on my answering machine. And it basically said, "Hello, Mr. Tenney. I live in Traverse City, Michigan. Last night, the police chased a UFO for 45 minutes. What do you know about that?" And so I called the gentleman back. I said, "I don't know anything because I live in Detroit, which is, 5 hours away from you." So I reached out to the Traverse City police. They said that absolutely 100% they had not chased a UFO. I filed a couple of Freedom of Information Act requests. They all were returned saying, "We don't have any information what you were talking about." I called that gentleman back and said, I can't find any information. And he was livid because he knew that he heard on his police scanner these police chasing a UFO.
Oh, wow.
And about 4 months later, I got like the craziest X-Files, like government secret. Like I got a manila envelope delivered to my house with no return address. And inside of it was a cassette tape from the police dispatch in Traverse City and contained about 45 minutes of the police in Traverse City chasing a UFO over the lake.
Whoa. Now, who do you think left that tape for you?
I mean, I had filed enough Freedom of Information Act requests and talked to enough police officers over the phone in that office that they knew that I was looking for something, and I had left my contact information with all of them. So I don't know who gave it to me, but in that envelope it said, "This is the recording you're looking for. The original has already been destroyed."
Man, that's haunting.
That's got to be a police officer that was like pissed that they couldn't report it or talk about it, don't you think? That sounds like some of these pilots that have seen this stuff that finally were fed up that they had nowhere to talk about this.
Yeah, for sure. And if you listen to the beginning of the tape, I have it uploaded on my YouTube channel. It's clipped down to a few minutes because there's a lot of gaps while they spark back and forth between them. But, it starts off with a single police officer saying, does anybody see this in the sky? And they go through, is it a helicopter? Is it a fireball? Is it a comet? And then some other people get on the line, and then other officers start chasing it. Then other officers see it. And at the very end of the tape, I think the lieutenant shows up, and the tape goes dead for about 10 minutes, and then the original reporting officer comes on and he says, forget what I was talking about, it's just a star.
So
Whoa.
ridiculous.
Any
Okay.
details of the craft itself that you can recall?
Bright white light moving back and forth in the sky, traveling pretty vast distances if you're listening to the tape and where the officers are located, because they give their locations, where they're seeing it from. And so it's moving between some pretty decent distances pretty quickly, but they all just reported it as like a singular super bright light in the sky moving back and forth.
That's crazy. And of course, the Bay is right there in Traverse City as well.
Yeah.
It's right on the water.
Absolutely.
Well, where's that link? I'll put it up in our show notes so people can listen to it.
Yeah, I'll send you a link to it.
Okay, great. We'll throw that up in the show notes if you guys are listening.
And then what I was going to say too, when we were talking about that plane that disappeared over in 1950. So 3 years later is when you have the Kinross Incident in Lake Superior, which is a UFO incident where a UFO is spotted on radar by Kinross Air Force Base in the Upper Peninsula. So they scramble a jet plane to go and check it out because it's the height of the Cold War and you can't have an unidentified object flying into American airspace. They scramble this plane, it gets in the air. They watch the jet that they've scrambled approaching the unidentified object on radar. They see the two objects merge on the radar, and then they see both objects vanish on the radar.
What?
They immediately scramble two more planes, put them up in the air. There's never any wreckage. The guys in the plane are never found.
What?
Wow.
So the planes themselves, was the planes merged on the radar?
So on the because they're watching the radar scope. So I mean, they could have been above or below each other, but
Yeah.
because you're just watching a flat radar screen, but you're seeing the two returns, the two radar returns, getting closer and closer as the jet closes in on the unidentified object, and then eventually they overlap, so they become one, and then the image of just vanishes off the radar screen.
If you had to postulate, John, what do you make of that? What do you think's going on there?
It's crazy. When I found out, I have a lot of ideas. I mean, everything as simple as I spent a lot of time with this case. Let me just back this up. So when I came into this case, when I first started reading about it in books, I was probably 17 or 18.
Kinross case.
The Kinross case.
Okay.
And one of the things that drove me really crazy was that the guys on the plane, Felix Moncla, was the pilot on the plane. But Robert, who was on the plane, people kept spelling his name wrong, and it made me super mad. So I got really interested in this case because I was like, the least a researcher can do is spell the guy's name right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent about 10 years trying to get documents from the government about what happened to this. And at the time I started, there were only, I think, 50 pages released from the Kinross investigation. I was like, there's got to be more than that. Like, this is the disappearance of an American jet fighter and two pilots in 1953. Like, there's got to be more than 50 documents. So I found out that there were like 500 documents, and I spent like 10 years and eventually kind of tricked the government into giving me those 500 documents.
How?
How did you do that? Did you dress up as like a Miss America pageant contestant and stroll into the office Bugs Bunny style and distract everybody?
It was a little more. So I had been writing Freedom of Information Act requests, and they had been denying them for many years. And eventually I got this weird idea into my head. Like, I was so mad with how the government was treating me that I wrote a FOIA request for all documents about the Kinross incident, and I sent the FOIA request to the Department of Energy, which has nothing to do with Kinross.
Oh, wow.
And I got their FOIA officer on the phone, and she said, we don't have any documents. We're not involved in this. And I said, I have a document that mentions you, so you should have a copy of this. And so she said, well, let me check into it and I'll get back to you. So a couple weeks go by, she calls me back and she says, listen, she goes, I've talked to the Department of Defense and I ordered copies of their documents. She's like, and I'm sitting in front of a stack of 500 pages is sitting in front of me. I've been through every single one of them. And the Department of Energy isn't named in any of these files. She's like, I don't have anything to send you. And I said, no, you need to read my FOIA request because it requests any documents you may currently or in the future be possession of. And you just told me that you have 500 documents in front of you.
So
I expect
good.
those this
So
week.
good.
Nice.
Yeah.
So,
Checkmate.
Yeah. So 4 days later, I got 500 documents, and
she's like, "All right, if this bitch wants them, I'm going to send every goddamn last one of these."
You want the censored one too? Yeah.
I'll tell you what. Over 10 years of researching the case, like I got to a point where I was like, okay. I even had gone into researching the plane, which was an F-89C Scorpion, and I learned all about like aerial elasticity of wings and the underscoop air. Like I knew the plane inside out, and I had gotten to this point after 10 years where I was like, okay, it was cold out. This plane has a problem with icing. It probably didn't come in contact with a UFO. It probably went into Lake Superior, and it hit so fast it just disintegrated. Like that's where I had gotten. But then I got these 500 pages of documents, and in that is court testimony from the other pilots who were scrambled to go and look for the first disappeared plane. And they got up in the air and into the area like 25 minutes after the radar return vanished. And they could hear the original plane still on the radio asking for help.
Whoa. I'm surprised this isn't better known. This is, I mean, I'll be honest with you guys. We did the disappearance of Flight 19. This is way more exciting.
Well,
I'll tell you those missing pilots.
Right, of course.
I'll tell you one of the really great things that came out of that case, aside from just having a bunch of weird files in my house and knowing some weird stuff about that Kinross case, is the family, Felix, the pilot of the plane, Felix Moncla Jr., Gene, his wife and children were still alive when I was researching this stuff. It was 53. And so the kids were relatively still young and the wife was older, but because they had never been classified as like missing in action or dead, the family had never received any military benefits.
Wow.
So once the documents were released and we could get them classified, as at least missing in action, the family got all of their back benefits. So now if you go down to New Orleans, where Felix is from, where they have a monument to him, there's a gravestone that says, in honor of Felix Moncla Jr. and Robert Wilson, who died defending the United States against flying saucers.
Whoa. That's awesome. Also doing great work while uncovering the UFO phenomena. That's incredible. Yeah. By the way, where do you keep all your files? Do you have like a really cool file cabinet room? Have you like?
I do have a really cool file cabinet room.
All right, let's take a minute. Let's hear about it. We gotta hear about it.
John.
We gotta hear about this file cabinet room.
Okay, yeah.
Well, no, go ahead, Bryce. What do you want?
I was just gonna say, I'd like to become like legit. I'd love to like one day have John like walk us through filing a FOIA. You know what I mean? I feel like before BCC is said and done, we should all at least once file a FOIA.
I back that. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Listen, I tell everybody at all of my lectures that like FOIA, like it's everything, that all the paperwork the government has is paid for with taxpayer money. Like it's ours.
Right.
Like if you want it, ask for it. The problem is with FOIA and the way it's become, there's so much legalese and government speak. So a mentor of mine, Craig, and I, we spent probably 11 years learning how to write the correct way to submit a FOIA, because if you don't ask them specifically for what you want, they're not going to look for it. So if you just send a letter to the government that says, please send me everything you have about UFOs, the government will send you back a letter that says, like, we have 5.6 million pages of documents on UFOs at 5 cents a copy. At 5 cents a copy, how many do you want? Which ones do you want? So you have to be really specific. Or if you ask for something in not the right way. So like my FOIA request uses some of that government speak and legalese to find you stuff. Like the government, especially the Department of Defense. Department of Defense has a filing system called Do Not File files. And so like in your FOIA request, you have to ask, like, I also want you to search Do Not File files. And if you don't ask for that, they don't.
That's amazing.
Oh.
That's amazing. Man, the wealth of knowledge. It's incredible.
This is like a Patreon episode. We'll have how to file a FOIA with John E.L. Tenney.
Patreon.
That would
It's
be
a
a good
freaking
episode.
it's an online class. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
But it's great. It's not only great for UFOs. It's great. I tell one of the reasons I talk about this at my lectures is because I tell it to ghost hunters. You can file a FOIA request with the state police or the local police about an address. So you can find out every time the police have been called to an address, if the place has ever caught on fire, if there's ever been a murder in a location. Like, even if you buy a house, you should file a FOIA request on the house before you buy the house, because you can find out if the house has been burnt down and, sloppily rebuilt.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
Guys, come for the UFO and water high strangeness. Stay for the FOIA knowledge. This is stuff that you can actually use. That's the benefit of BCC. John, we got to wrap up here in a few minutes, but any other stories from this what was it, the Great Lake Triangle? What was it?
Great Lakes Triangle.
Yeah.
We have just a ton of endless reports of UFOs going in and out of the lakes. In my case files upstairs in that file cabinet room, I can't tell you how many people have seen UFOs or USOs plunging out of Lake Huron and Lake Michigan and Lake Superior, and then or diving back into them. It's really endless. Or people seeing lights moving beneath the water. So I really do feel like, and obviously I'm sure you guys have talked about this, like, the water is a great place to hide if you're a UFO.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. It's I mean, do you subscribe to the idea that maybe that's where these things are from?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're going to, your vehicle already traverses, the inky blackness of infinitude through space. Like, if you get here, what other, you can hide underwater. Obviously you don't need air and you're not worried about pressure changes. So just dip below 80% of the planet somewhere where we can't go and do whatever you need to do. Or, as a kid, I'm sure we all, were interested and mesmerized by legends of Atlantis and the fact that there, are these ancient folklores and mythologies about advanced civilizations underneath the water. And you have to wonder, like, where does that spark from? Where does that come from? Did those aquatic apes go down there and start building buildings? What's going on?
I mean, seriously, absolutely. I have sort of one question. You've been doing this for so long. You must go sort of in and out of rabbit holes, and I guess I'm curious, what really excites you today in the world of the paranormal or the mystical or the occult, or what's really, caught your attention as of late?
It's really strange for me, because you would think that after all this time, hearing someone's personal ghost story, like, it would just be kind of boring to me. But there is really, as I get older and I start to really key in on my kind of bullshit detector, and when just having someone sit across from me and very honestly and earnestly and openly telling me a story about, it happened at Liberty, Missouri, a woman telling me about the fairies that she grew up with, and listening to this modern day story of the fae and the fae folk, and watching, like, tears well up in her eyes when she was talking about how much it meant to her. And like that stuff is so exciting to me all these years later.
Do you feel comfortable sharing some of what she told you?
I wouldn't, just because I don't without people's permission.
Yeah, fair enough. That's why I ask. That's fascinating. I mean, it must be cool to be working in this field for so long and still not only hear stories that surprise you, but also feel so emotionally connected. Because I do think that's the thing that a lot of people take for granted, is the emotional impact that these encounters have with you, obviously when it comes to something like ghosts or getting messages from beyond, so often those feel connected to loved ones, or just the terror, as you described, from experiencing something unknown, the backlash that happens and how that makes you feel, you know, as was the case with the Foster. What was that his name? The farmer who
Manor,
saw
Frank Manor. Yeah.
Manor. Thank you. Yeah, I
But I
think
mean,
that's
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I mean,
no.
you know, one of the things that I tell, and I probably said it on here before, and you guys are actually doing it. You're a part of it. Like when we tell stories, we're a part of it. I tell people all the time at my lectures, if there's no such thing as ghosts, if there's no such thing as Bigfoot, if there really is no such thing as UFOs, if all of that stuff is only and only a mechanism for us to have conversations about how we think and feel about our place in the universe, then they're still vastly important.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. Well
I
Yeah,
said.
love
because
that.
I think that's the thing about these conversations that we've been having since the start of the show. You know, I think it does give an opportunity, obviously, for us, for you, and for our listeners to like stop the constant conversation that is going on about the modern world and stress and everything, relationships, work, whatever, politics, news, and really stop. And I think these things do make us think outside of the box, you know, that, for lack of a better term, they kind of make us stop and have conversations that we wouldn't normally have with unless you're running into, you know, the four of us are running into each other at an hors d'oeuvres table at somebody's party, and we're like, thank God I can talk about UFOs with somebody here, you know.
For sure. And, you know, the world we live in can sometimes be colored in a lot of very off-putting shades and hues. And I feel like ghosts and UFOs and Bigfoot and aquatic apes and Atlantis and all of that stuff, you know, adds some color to our lives sometimes.
Yeah,
I agree.
And you know what? And I'm just one final thought. I loved the verbiage you used. Mechanisms set in place to sort of ask these questions, and perhaps, you know, us as a human species have created these mechanisms ourselves so that we can, in fact, you know, converse with ourselves, asking, "Who am I?" You know what I mean? By dealing with these archetypes of the wild man of the woods and these skinny gray aliens of the future. And, you know, perhaps it's us creating this stuff so that we can have this dialogue about who we are, where we come from, and where we're going.
Absolutely. And you know what? Any reason to have a deep connection with someone is invaluable at this point.
That's all we need. Okay, so for listeners who are following along with us in a jet ski, BCC's jet ski summer, if you could sort of say, here's what I think the connection between high strangeness and water might be. What's your thought on that?
Oh, geez.
Is it a conduit? Is it? I've always thought, is it for the paranormal specifically? Is it does it channel another dimension somehow?
I really do kind of sometimes feel like that, right? Like we are so connected to it and it is so much of us. It feels like the perfect medium to use to communicate these strange ideas. And, you know, this folklore, these mythology, these stories we tell each other, we often use the word about how they are fluid. And I don't think that that's a mistake, right? Like, I think that we are this ever-shaped, ever-changed thing. And the water that's in my body right now has been on this planet for millions of years. So who knows what it has seen and done.
I love that. John E.L. Tenney, where can people find you and your work?
All of my social media, Twitter, Instagram, all that is John E.L. Tenney. My website is weirdlectures.com. And once a week, I do a pretty silly podcast with my friend Jessica called What's Up Weirdo? And that's available wherever you put podcasts in your ear holes.
Guys, subscribe to it. Put it on your list. What are you doing? You got to listen to it. Well, thank you so much, John, for being on the show. We love you. It wouldn't be summer here in the clubhouse without a visit from
Here.
John Tenney. Come back again, please, anytime. We'd love to have you.
Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Great. Riley, before we go, do you have anything to plug?
I mean, I just want to bring up the ultra terrestrial tier of the Patreon one more time. It's I mean, if you're not already a Patreon member, the whole thing truly is excellent. It's $5 a month. If you're feeling saucy, For $9 a month, you get this extra tier, which includes scores from the show. There's already a back catalog developing. You can download them all and put them into your music library. It's hours already of ambient music.
Hours of awesome ambient soundscapes from Riley. You must, guys. Honestly, you must do it. It's fantastic.
And even if you want to just jump on for a month, just $9, you download the catalog, dip back out. You can come back again later. I don't care. I just want you guys to have the music. I've wanted to do this for a long time since we've been making the show, because I've done, like, between the main feed and the Patreon, I've done something like 300, maybe 400 scores. And so it's nice to finally have an outlet for them. But I'm dropping demos from a record I'm working on. We're dropping songs from the show, like BJ and the Shadowbats tunes and Club Bryce tunes. I'm also writing these little rambling letters about life and love and the apocalypse and everything in between, and also music theory and history. I don't know, just whatever's on my mind that week, really. But it's a fun little corner of the show, and if you're interested, I would really recommend you check it out.
Yeah, I agree. Bryce, what do you got?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, well, I'll plug for you. How about check out all of season 3 of Expedition Bigfoot, which is on Discovery Plus right now, hosted by our boy Bryce O. Johnson. And a reminder that Bryce got the BCC boys on Cameo, so you can download the app and look for us individually if you want us to say hi or hello to you, or hello to you, or a loved one. That's why Bigfoot says hello. Did you know that? Hello. I signed up for it wrong, but now I'm on it, so you can find me there as well. As for me, season 1 of Slate Your Name is available wherever you get your podcasts. Get caught up on that before the series returns in the fall. And of course, if you need an acting or audition coach, you can book my services at bookitwithmike@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at Bigfoot Collectors Club. I'm McMills. Bryce is Mr. Bryce Johnson, and Riley is at Peace Drone. We want to thank John one last time for joining us. Thank you, John.
Yes. Thank you, John.
I said before that it was a blast. I missed it, right? Like I should have said it's been a splash.
Oh, there you go.
Nice.
All right, Bryce. There you go. All right, everybody. Until next time, good night.
And go get regressed.
There it is.
Oh, man. Thank you, John, for putting up with us, man.
Hey, no problem. I have 2 things before I go real quick.
Yeah.
One, Bryce, I hope that there's going to be an aquatic ape coming up soon on Expedition Bigfoot.
Oh, my God. That would be amazing.
Better go get it.
Want to see you scuba diving.
Yes.
I want to see Bryce scuba.
John, did you see the episode where he found some sort of witchy totem underwater with some sort of underwater scuba camera?
I don't think I saw that one.
It's weird. He found like a weird witchy totem that he left. I mean, we're all upset with him that he left it under the water, but he didn't want to get wet, which is fine. But
also it's probably best practices if it was a witchy totem.
Left where
leave it there.
We've all seen Blair Witch and how it ends. Yeah.
And then the other thing is, Riley, I don't know if you know this, but I have a band camp where I have 2 soundtracks that I did.
What? I didn't know that.
That are all kind of weird, ambient, industrial, discordant music. And like the one of them is based on Joe Simonton's Pancake Experience, and the other one is based on Ted Sirios, who did Thoughtography.
Oh, amazing. What's the name of the band camp? Is it just under your name? Or
I think it's just Bandcamp, John E.L. Tenney, whatever.
Oh, I can't wait to check
I think
that
we got
out.
to leave this in. We got to leave this in so everybody can hear it.
I actually forgot to push stop, so we are still rolling.
Great.
Well, look at that.
There you go. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Good night.
Good night.
Bigfoot Collectors Club is produced by Riley Bray and Michael McMillan and scored and engineered by Riley Bray. Our theme song, Come Alone, is by Suneaters, courtesy of Lotuspool Records. Do us a favor and support the show and unlock 3 bonus episodes every month by becoming a member of our Patreon, BCC The Other Side, which can be found at patreon.com/Bigfoot Collectors Club.